Good day everyone, we are the group 1 and our report it is all about chapter 1 communication processes, principles and ethics. So number 1 is what did you learn from the activity? You learn from the activity it is the verbal is the use of words to convey the message. Some of forms of verbal communication are written and oral communication. So example, it is the written communication, letters and texting. And oral communication, which is the example is conversation with your friends, family, colleagues, presentation, also the speeches. The non-verbal communication, it is transmission of a message or signals through a non-verbal platform such as eye contact, facial expression, gesture, postures, and body language. So, the example is the facial expression, the gesture, the postures, and the body language. So, what kind of noise interfered with the correctness of the message received? So, noise creates distortion of the message and prevent it from being understood the way it was intended. So, the different types of noise include physical, semantic, psychological, and physiological. Each interferes with the process of communication in different ways. So when we say physical noise is any sort of outside communication effort by someone or something, for example, a loud noise that interrupt or distract you. So number 2 is semantic noise. Is the interference during the construction of a message as when you professor use unfamiliar words. The example nga, pagbuo sa isa ka mensahe na daw hindi mo. Number 3 is psychological noise. Consists of distraction to a speaker message caused by a receiver internal thoughts. Number 4 is physiological noise. Consists of distraction to a speaker message caused by a listener and body. How can communication be effective? So, be an engaged listener. Number 2 is express yourself. 3, pay attention to nonverbal signs. 4, control your emotion. And lastly, make intentional language choices. So next is the communication process. So when you say communication process, it refers to a series of action or step taken in order to successfully communicate. It involves several components such as the sender of the communication, the actual message being sent, the encoding of the message, the receiver, and decoding of the message.
So there are 4 primary principles of communication. Number 1, the message sent is not necessarily the message received. Number 2, it is impossible to communicate. Number 3, every message has both content and feeling. And number 4, non-verbal cues are more believable than verbal cues. The message sent may not be the message received, because it must pass through a filtering system of thoughts and feelings for both the sender and the receiver. As a result, when an adult comes home frustrated or angry about his or her workday, he or she may communicate anger or impatience to his or to her partner or children, even though that is not his or her intent. The message must also pass through the listener's own filter of thoughts and feelings. If a partner or child expects the sender of the message to be angry and impatient, he or she may hear neutral or even positive statements as harsh or angry. There is considerable room for misunderstanding between the speaker intends to say, what he or she actually says, and what the listener hears. The less conscious attention the speaker and the listener is paying, the more distracted they are internal or external stimuli. When the message is sent and more emotionally charged the subject is, the more likely it is that there will be a disconnect between what the speaker intends to say, what he or she actually says, and what the listener hears.
Number 3. Every message has both content and feeling. Every message consists of content and feeling. The content is what the message is about based on the words used. The feeling connected to the content is expressed through nonverbal cues, body language, gesture, facial expression, tone of voice, inflection, and voice volume. Number 4. Nonverbal cues are more believable than verbal cues. Electronic communication via email, text, and other forms of instant messaging can be so challenging and easily misinterpreted, precisely because the words used are isolated from any and all of nonverbal cues that provides essential information and clarification. Elements of communication. Human communication is interpersonal. It is purposive and is a two-way process. More than sender, speaker, listener, receiver needs other elements to be able to complete the process of elements of communication. Number 1. Sender, also known as the speaker or encoder, is the one who sends the oral or written message. Number 2. Receiver, also known as the listener or decoder, is the one who listens and decodes the conveyed message. The receiver is also responsible for providing feedback to the sender. Message is whatever the sender communicates to the receiver, or the information received by the receiver from the sender. Messages are ideas and feelings that make up the content of a process of communication. Channel is the medium or means through which the message is transmitted. Some familiar channels are radio, television, records, newspapers, and magazines. In the mass media, other channels communicate nonverbal messages through the use of the human senses such as touching, smelling, and tasting. Number 5. Noise is also known as the interference that keeps a message from being understood or accurately interpreted, such as physical, psychological, physiological, and semantic noise. Number 6. Situation is the time and place which communication occurs. Communication adapts to the setting. For example, the language of students in the classroom are quite different from the language they use at home. Then lastly, number 7, feedback is the message receivers send to the source in response to the sender's message. Feedback can be in the form of verbal or non-verbal response.
General principles of effective communication. First, know your purpose in communicating. Second, know your audience. Third, know your topic. Fourth, adjust your speech or writing to the context of the situation. Last, work on feedback given to you. Communication ethics. Communication ethics is about the goodness of communication interaction. Both are inseparable in all human interaction, from speaking to an older police officer, students, university, president, and etc. They are both hindi mapahiwalay sa tanan nga ugnay sa tao. Sa pag-istorya sa mga the older police officer, student, university, president, and etc. Thus, ethical questions infuse all areas of discipline, including rhetoric, media studies, intercultural, intracultural communication, personal and organizational communication, etc. So, ang ethical pamangkot nabutang sa tanan sa larangan sa pagdisiplina kabilang ang rhetoric, religious studies, intercultural, communication, relational and organizational communication, and etc. The National Communication Association Credo or Ethical Communication is one of the bases for the standard ethical communication. Ang National Communication Association na para sa ethical na komunikasyon ay isa sa mga batayan para sa pamantayan. Questions of right and wrongs arise when people communicate. Ang mga pamangkot nga tama kag mali nagagwa kung nagakigistorya ang mga tao. Ethical communication is fundamental to responsible thinking, decision-making, and the development of relationships and community within the across context. So, ang ethical communication is very important sa responsible nga pagpanumdum kag pag-obra sa mga desisyon, maayong nga desisyon kag pag-unlad sa relasyon and sa community within the said context. Ethical communication enhances human will and dignity by fostering truthfulness and fairness, responsibility, personal integrity, and respect for self and others. We believe that an ethical communication and consequently the well-being of individuals in the society in which we live. So, kita nagapati nga ang unethical communication kay ang kapakanan sa mga individual sa lipunan nga atong ginahulagan.
We advocate truthfulness, accuracy, honesty, and reason as essential to the integrity of communications. We endorse freedom of expression, diversity of perspective, and tolerance of dissent to achieve the informed and responsible decision-making fundamental to a civil society. We strive to understand and respect other communicators before evaluating and responding to their messages. We promote access to communications, resources, and opportunities as necessary to fulfill human potential and contributes to the well-being of families, communities, and society. We promote communication climates of caring and mutual understanding that respect the unique needs and characteristics of individual communicators. We condemn communications that degrades individual and humanity through distortion, intimidation, coercion, and violence, and through the expression of intolerance and hatred. We are committed to courageous expression of personal conviction in pursuit of fairness and justice. We advocate sharing of information, opinions, and feelings when facing significant choices, while also respecting privacy and confidentiality. We accept responsibility for the short and long-term consequences for our own communication and expect the sum of others. Communicating with people from different cultures. The importance of culture. There are many definitions, but it would be fair to say that it is the acquired knowledge that people use to interpret, experience, and generate social behaviors. In some culture, a sweat and tie for men and a sweat and a skirt for women may be appropriate business attire, while in other cultures, the business attire may be less formal. For some cultures, a business meeting with a superior will begin with introductory bows, and in other cultures, the meeting would begin with a handshake. Each culture has its own set of habits, values, and ways of interacting with others, and these differences between cultures frequently are the source of problems is intercultural communication. The communications process is a two-way street with both the sender and receiver having an effect on what is communicated and how it is interpreted. This can involve both the external and internal flow of information as well as verbal and non-verbal communication styles. Because culture affects so many aspects of people's lives, people are frequently unaware of their own culture and how it differs from other cultures.
In addition, most people have a tendency to assume that the values, behaviors, communication, and style of their own culture are what are normal or correct, and that the behavior, values, and so on of people from other cultures are strange and incorrect. This is called ethnocentrism, and it is a common attitude with people who have not been exposed to different cultures or who are willing to accept the benefits of diversity. An important barrier to intercultural communications is language. Even though people from other cultures may speak English, it may not be your English. That is because even the language people speak from other English-speaking cultures, such as Great Britain, has some important differences from the English spoken in the United States, and these differences can create miscommunication and misunderstandings.
Example that illustrate how simple expression can be utterly confusing to some. Number 1. Your friendly new British colleague you meet in the corridor make a comment you took literally. They said, "You should come over for a coffee sometime." Sounds like an invite? Yes. Actually, no, as they would most likely be very surprised if you turned up at their doorstep. However, to understand such thing, you need to look behind the spoken words. Your friendly British colleague was just being polite. "Let's do something sometime" is merely an English expression, bearing as much weight and actual intention behind it as the notorious "Hi, how are you?" If they really didn't want to invite you for a coffee, they would have made a date. Number 2. Your colleague from Eastern Europe needs you to do something for him, but surprises you with the way they ask. They simply bark a request at you, which you find a little surprising and possibly even a little rude. Your Eastern European colleague was actually making a polite request in what they thought was a perfectly polite manner. If you take a closer look at what a polite request is in English, a simple sentence tends to contain at least two places, one or two. Could you and would you, and sometimes even opens with a phrase, "Would you like to?" when clearly this is not the case. Number 3. For non-Americans, when your American colleague wanted a warm-up of their coffee, they did not mean for you to reheat the said leftovers at the bottom of their cup, but in fact, I refill it, as this is simple an American expression. Language is a phenomenon that is very deeply set in our culture, our roots, and our background. We tend to always come back to the way of expressing our thoughts that is most natural to us. That's all. Good afternoon, everyone.